Welcome, everyone. My name is Lindsay Rogers. I'm one of the directors here, and I'm honored to be with you to help celebrate two wonderful individuals' lives, Tom and Virginia Prather. I'd like to take this opportunity, if anyone has a cell phone, to please turn it off, so that way it won't ring during our services today. And I'd also like to welcome those who are joining us via webcast. We have several people there, so welcome and thank you for joining us today. I will now turn the podium over to Max, who will lead us in our services today. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Our Lord said, I am the resurrection and the life. For those who believe in me, though they die, yet shall they live. My name is Max Greiter. I'm a pastor of the Christian Harvest Non-Denominational Church. It's my privilege to join you today as we celebrate the remarkable lives of Thomas Allen Prather and Virginia Louise Leach Prather. Tom departed this earthly sphere in February of last year, February 9th, and a short time later, on April 17th, 2020, his beloved Virginia joined him in the eternal quest. I was not a spiritual advisor to Tom and Virginia. I was the manager of retirement community at Glen Eagle here in Traverse City. It was a second career for my wife and I after we had retired from downstate and moved up here. But we did have many spiritual conversations. I am going to try today not to follow in my father's footsteps. My dad was pastor of Bethany Church down on Washington Avenue. It's now part of the Hall of Justice, the Robert P. Griffin Hall of Justice. In those days, a 30-minute message was kind of the limit, and sometimes Dad went 35. I'm going to try not to be too long with your time today, because there are other people that are going to be coming to speak as well. I would like to say this, though. I recognized as a preacher's kid, as my dad's oldest son, that sometimes somebody needed to stand up and do something. So it was a Sunday night. Dad hadn't even spoken yet, but the song leader said, does anybody have a song request for tonight? And I raised my hand. I'm sure they were expecting something really spiritual from the eldest son of the minister. But they turned the song that I chose, and it was, Lord, dismiss us with thy blessing. Needless to say, I didn't get called on many times after that to pick out a song. My relationship with Tom and Jenny, as I said, was as a manager at Glen Eagle. But my wife and I, because this was a second career for us, it was more of a ministry for us than it was a job. And we developed close relationships with our residents there, in particular with the special ones. And Tom and Virginia were indeed special residents. Tom had some health issues, as I recall. My wife was the general manager at the time of Glen Eagle. And Virginia came twice to inspect the community and to talk to Mom about her concerns and expectations. She was afraid that the house in Elk Rapids was going to be too much in terms of maintenance, upkeep, responsibility with Tom's health conditions. So she came twice on her own before she brought Tom. But Tom came, liked it, and I think Tom wanted Virginia to be happy. And so they chose to move into Glen Eagle and immediately acclimated themselves to the community. We had a dining room style breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And The Prathers were in demand. You know, we had four chairs to a table. And because Tom was such a great conversationalist, and because both of them were so kind, considerate, and thoughtful, people literally would come down earlier because they knew where Tom and Virginia most often sat and try to grab a seat. One of the things that particularly endeared Tom and Virginia to me was that they welcomed people to their table who maybe weren't as welcomed at other tables. You know, there's politics, I guess, even in a retirement community. And some people just, I don't know, had a highbrow view of themselves, and so they didn't always welcome whoever said, "Do you mind if I sit at your table this afternoon or tonight?" Tom and Virginia were never like that, and because of that, they were loved and respected in our community. Yvonne and Virginia used to do laps together. Virginia was really an athlete, very active, loved to walk, and once a week, Yvonne got to, as part of her responsibility, she loved this part of the responsibility, she got to lead physical activity. And she would usually lead a walk around Glen Eagle. It had paved surroundings, and so she would lead that, and she and Virginia had lots of enjoyable conversations during that. They also, when Yvonne would get off duty in the evening, would quite often, after the supper hour, go out and have a walk, and they had nice conversations. Tom and I, although we rooted for different teams, we enjoyed watching baseball together. Tom was a Detroit Tiger fan. My dad was raised in the South, and I was raised, even though I was born in Highland Park, Michigan, I was raised as a St. Louis Cardinal fan. For those of you who are Tiger fans, I do forgive you for 1968. It's been painful, but I'm on my way to recovery. So, Tom called me in January of 2020 and asked that Yvonne and I come by for a visit. At this time, Tom and Virginia were no longer living at Glen Eagle. Yvonne and I had retired a little over a year earlier, as I recall. And he said, "Would you stop by when you have a chance?" Well, within a few days, we stopped by, and Tom shared with me the circumstances. He was wheelchair bound at that time, and Virginia was living in the UP near her daughter in a memory care unit. Tom didn't complain much about his physical ailments, although it was apparent his legs were a real problem for him. But I think the hardest thing for him to adjust to was the separation from his wife of 64 years. Tom's job did sometimes take him away, so it wasn't like it was the first time that they had been apart, but they were best friends and lifelong partners, and it was very difficult for them to be separated. When Tom invited Yvonne and I over, he handed me a copy of his memoir, and he also blessed me by asking if I would consider officiating services for Virginia and himself when the time came. Little did I know how quickly that time would come, because in February, just a few weeks later, I got a call while Yvonne and I were in Arizona and learned that Tom had gone to be with the Lord. And then just 2 months later, Virginia had joined him. Now, COVID was raging, and that's why we are meeting here in April of 2021. But I am so thankful and blessed to see this nice turnout to commemorate the exceptional lives of Tom and Virginia Prather. I'm going to start. I read the entire memoir. It was a very fascinating story. Tom was a storyteller. But I'm going to really start the story where it became a love story, and that was in the early 1950s. Tom and Virginia had been previously acquainted. In fact, I think Tom had given Virginia a ride home from an activity some years earlier, but he considered Virginia too young at that time to be someone who he could court. Now, years had passed, and Tom's sister, Jane, arranged for a date with Virginia at a Junior Farm Bureau activity. Tom was quickly smitten by this young, beautiful, intelligent, and talented woman. In fact, Virginia was a national baton champion, and continued to use that activity to be involved in stage programs. And about a year after that first date, Tom asked Virginia to be his wife. He was delighted, but somewhat surprised when that beautiful woman agreed to be his wife. And the plan was for them to marry after Tom completed his military obligation. Well, fate gets in the way of obligations, and it turns out Tom never did do that military time. He had purchased his first new car. I think it was a 4-year-old vehicle. It was a Pontiac, and he shined it and kept care of it and had a lot of pride in it. He was on his way home one day and went around a curve, and somebody going the opposite direction came across the center point of the road and smashed his vehicle, destroyed his car, but even worse, nearly killed Tom. That gentleman did lose his life in the accident. Tom woke up 3 days later and had no idea what he had been through in that 72 hours prior. When his mangled body was brought to the Lee Memorial Hospital in Dowagiac, I believe it was, he was in such bad shape and the nurse could not find a pulse or any evidence of life. She put a sheet over his head. There was no doctor on duty at the time, and they thought that Tom had left this earthly sphere. Had it not been for an X-ray technician rushing through the hallways and bumping Tom's gurney, we may not be here today having this conversation. But when he bumped the gurney, Tom let out a groan and moved, and they discovered that the man they thought was dead was not. But he did have multiple injuries, including a punctured lung, 2 broken legs, 5 fractures in his pelvis, a broken hip joint, a chest puncture, several broken bones in his feet. Tom's recovery was extremely challenging. It included 21 pints of infused blood, 110 days immobilized in a Stryker hospital bed, and then another 90 days at home before he was able to take his first step with crutches. Now, during that time that he was convalescing, Tom thought, Virginia should probably find a better deal than the one I have to offer her. But Virginia was a faithful fiance and spent countless hours beside Tom's bed, encouraging him and helping him to regain his stamina and his desire for life. So that 200 days was just the start of him once again learning to walk. It was a very painful and arduous process. But it wasn't too many months later, in fact, 1 year and 1 day after Tom had proposed to Virginia, that they became husband and wife at the Union Protestant Church in Daly, Michigan. From that point, it was time to find work. And Tom's injuries prevented him from, he was a very handy guy, but because of the injuries, he really wasn't physically able to pick up where he had left off in the past. He was offered a job, a cleanup job, janitorial type job, shortly after they got married. And he told the owner, he says, look, you see what you've got here? I will do the best that I can, but this is going to be challenging. And it did turn out to be extremely challenging beyond what Tom's physical abilities would allow. As fate would have it, though, Tom was shortly thereafter offered an office job, and he became quite a success in that endeavor. He took a job with a regional auto company that built parts and stocked parts for a series of stores. And Tom worked for them in the office for a number of months before being offered the manager's job back home in Dowagiac, managing one of their home stores. Virginia Ann was born by this time, and he was delighted to be home back in Dowagiac. Next up was daughter Gwen, and that completed the Prather family, Tom and the 3 women who he loved. Jenny at that time worked for Lowe's Incorporated, which was the parent company of Tidy Cat. And Tom left the management of the auto parts industry, took a job at Lowe's as their purchasing agent. One of the things that he was proud of right up until his death was the fact that a Tidy Cat logo and color scheme that he had helped to design has survived, I think, even till today. I know last time Tom and I talked, the logo and color scheme were still intact. Over the course of Tom and Virginia's marriage, they moved more than a dozen times and lived in 5 different states: Michigan, Indiana, Missouri, Idaho, Oregon, and finally back to Michigan. Jenny had great success in insurance, especially individual health plans. Tom did well in sporting goods, real estate, and radio. He was actually a vice president at one time for Bass Pro Shops. And Tom and Jenny were also real estate pioneers, both successful realtors, but they created the first multiple listing system, while they lived in Oregon, I believe, that used the internet as a means to transfer information between real estate offices in America. After some years, Tom and Virginia sold that business venture, which still survives today in Oregon. During their years in Oregon, Tom and Virginia were very active in the Riverside Church. Their pastor, Steve Lusk, was a good listener and a close friend of the family, who the couple sometimes used as a sounding board and a counselor. One day, after Tom had vented and explained his frustrations with life, he asked Pastor Steve who he talked to when he needed to vent or complain. Pastor Steve smiled and replied, "I vent every day to the one who listens in silence." Throughout the memoir, Tom talks of Virginia's strong faith and his own lifelong search for meaning. The scripture says, "Seek and ye shall find." I believe that Tom's search for meaning resulted in him finding the spiritual meaning to life. Virginia and Tom's oldest daughter, Jenny Ann, and her family eventually moved back to Michigan. Gwen was ready to follow. It was about 1999, and with Tom approaching age 65, Tom and Virginia's desire to be near their daughters and their grandchildren pulled like a magnet back to the state where it had all begun. So the three Prathers, Tom, Virginia, and Gwen, along with Gwen's 4-year-old son, Eston, caravanned, left their jobs in Oregon, packed up their goods, and caravanned back to Michigan, with a stop in Edwardsburg, Michigan, to visit Grandma Leach's old home. Then they completed the 300-mile journey to Elk Rapids. I apologize that this celebration of Tom and Virginia's life tilts a little heavily toward Tom. You may understand because it's his memoir that I've used to extract so much of the information that I've presented, that is going to be an event that happens. But in that memoir, I must tell you, it was full of references to the woman who he loved so much, Virginia, to his daughters, Jenny Ann and Gwen, who he adored. It also specifically mentions every grandchild and great-grandchild with much pride and affection. And Tom also acknowledged that his wanderlust across 5 states and numerous careers, though personally rewarding, caused real hardship for Virginia, Jenny Ann, and Gwen. And I think although life's journey takes us places and those challenges are rewarding, I think looking back, he realized that there was a strong price that his family had paid as they followed him. I stand here today to tell you that Tom and Virginia Prather lived exemplary lives. They weren't perfect. Everyone in this room is born with the nature of the first man Adam and the first woman Eve. But Tom and Virginia lived lives devoted to each other and their family, loyal to friends and employers, honest, fair, and just in their interactions with their fellow travelers on this earthly plane. I have a few final comments that I will make, but at this time, I would like to invite anybody in the audience who has a fond memory or story that they would like to tell of their experiences with Tom and or Virginia Prather to come up. Is there anybody that would like to speak? We have family and friends that will.
I'm Jenny's sister, Catherine Ann. I was the little bratty sister that had to share the same bed with her in the old farmhouse. I was always with my dad out in the barn with the pigs. Jenny learned how to cook. She helped Mom in the house. She always baked the best pies. She always got the best award at the fair. I showed my pigs. She could cook. And Jenny and I, after Tom and Jenny got married, we were 7 years apart. So we really weren't close because there was such an age difference. When I guess I matured and we each had our families, and I moved to Florida. It became a close relationship. Every day, and I still do it, I walk out the door, I go down the road, pick up the neighbor lady's paper, hang it on her doorknob, walk back, and as I'm walking, I always look up at the sky, and I think of my sister. I would watch the stars. I'd watch the moon if it was a real short quarter moon. And then my process was pick up our paper, take it in to my husband, and go to you wouldn't believe it, but I did learn a little bit on the internet. And we conversed by the computer every day. I would say, I saw this big moon, which sees you. That's how we shared each other. I'd say, the stars, are out, or it's cloudy. And there was always, I think there was a flight from Tampa across our area of an airplane that would go over. And I would share that with her. And that was such a part of me that when I lost her, it was very difficult, and it still is, that morning commitment. But I still do it. I don't go to the computer, I just look in the sky, and I share with my sister, who was a wonderful sister.
Are there any other guests who would like to come and share a story? We have two more.
My name is Dick Garner, and I'm a coffee clutch friend of Tom and Ginny's. And my wife and I used to vacation in Elk Rapids on Birch Lake for 2 weeks every summer. And we got into the habit of having coffee and donuts down in the harbor area every morning for breakfast. And after that, one morning in about the year 2000, we were walking up into town and stopped in front of Java Jones and looked around and looked for a place to sit. And Tom was sitting at a table outside on the sidewalk. And he said, "Come join me." And that was Tom. He invited everybody to come join him. And then in 2007, my first wife and I were celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary. And we spent our 2 weeks at Birch Lake and visited Java Jones for coffee every morning when we were here. And we were handing out invitations to our 50th wedding anniversary. And so as we left Java Jones that morning, we handed an invitation and said, "We really don't expect you to come, but we want you to know that you'd be welcome if you'd like to come." And they made no comment whatsoever. And then about 2 weeks later, we were preparing for our celebration at our home in Aurora, Ohio. And the first people who came, we saw walking up the driveway, were Tom and Ginny Prather. And that's just the kind of people they were, just so welcoming, so friendly to everybody. And Aurora, Ohio is 425 miles away from Elk Rapids, Michigan. So this was not like going next door to an event. And they made the major effort, and we felt that they ranked among the best friends we had ever had. And they certainly rank in my mind as two of the finest human beings I have ever known. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, Gwen is going to come up.
Okay, I'm Gwen. I'm their youngest daughter. And I didn't too much prepare something, but we got a very lovely card from his sister Ann, Dad's sister Ann, who couldn't be here today. And I just wanted to share a little anecdote that she had in here. So, you had remarkable parents who were fun and gave you a wonderful and adventurous life. I have many wonderful memories of my big brother. I remember when he was about 15 and I was 7, he tied my hands to the hayloft ladder. Now, not to be mean, he just wanted somebody to stay to talk to while he did his chores. About the same time, he had the idea to saddle Jane's 4-H cow, Wilma, to see if we could ride her. He went on to have much better ideas than that one. It was an exciting time when Ginny came into our family. To me, she was a celebrity of sorts with her baton twirling. We loved her so very much. In recent years, Larry and I enjoyed meeting them in Nashville and going to the Grand Ole Opry. I remember our last visit there with them, John Connolly hosted, and it was Tom's favorite singer. I always think of Ginny during March Madness. She really liked basketball. Now, the rest of it I'm not going to read, but I just want to add a little thing about Mom and basketball. When they lived in Hood River, they had season tickets to the Portland Trail Blazers. This was during the Cliff Robertson, Clyde Drexler era of the Trailblazers. She always referred to them as her boys. She was going to go see her boys. If you were visiting and the basketball season, you were going to watch her boys. We even bought her a full-size poster of Clyde Drexler. And in the kitchen, they had this little pocket door that separated the kitchen from the dining room. And she put that poster on that pocket door, so whenever she closed it, she got to look at one of her boys. That was Mom. That was basketball.
Morgan?
First, I want to thank our interpreter. What was your name again? Jackie. I just want to say thank Jackie for being here today and helping us out. Also, the first thing I would like to do is, if you are able and willing, if you could stand up. Yeah. And then if we could all just do some Ginny Prather stretches. If we could just, if you're going to touch your toes, make sure you bend over directly at the waist, like she always did. Touch the, yeah. I know that it would have been, she would probably be so embarrassed right now that I asked everyone to do that. You can have a seat now. But also I know that she wouldn't have been able to sit still this long, much like I can't. Sometimes you just got to stretch it out a little bit. So, yep, no chance I'm going to do this without crying. What is most important to know and remember is my grandmother's unconditional love. I always knew I was safe, that I was loved, and that there was nothing I could do to mess that up. Even the year when I tripped and fell on the Christmas tree and crunched some of the bulbs, or the time that Eston accidentally sprayed the aerosol whipped cream can all over her at the breakfast table. My earliest memory of my grandmother is being so excited to go to their house in Hood River. And then when she opened the door, I was immediately terrified of this person I didn't really know. And I went and hid behind my mom's leg, and which should be some indication of how old I was if I could hide behind my mom's leg. And she just leaned over at the waist as she always did, and she said, "I see you, come here." And I think that's a thing that she did with all of her little grandchildren and great-grandchildren. My last memory of my grandmother was being able to sit at her side at the nursing home. She woke up and called me sweetheart. And it always meant a lot to me that my grandma always remembered who I was, even to the very end. She always remembered that I was her granddaughter. She told me that she had been spending lots of time with her family. I asked her if that had been nice, and she said, "Not really." Now, it's not for me to know whether that was the dementia or if she was, in fact, spending time with all of the family that was getting ready to welcome her once she had passed. And that is what I believe, that she was, in fact, talking to her husband and her late parents. But regardless, yesterday, as I sat around my aunt's house, and we were all together, laughing and loud, and all of the joy that we had together, I couldn't imagine her being any happier than knowing we were all together last night. Virginia Louise Leach Prather was a legend and a total badass. And she's the type of woman who knew what she wanted and she went after it. She would be slightly embarrassed by this description of her. And she always called it working hard. She talked about how we weren't born with a silver spoon in our mouths and that we earned everything that we did. And she is a legend that has been hugely influential in my life. I tried to write a poem, but I didn't get very far, but I am going to share what I was able to come up with. If I had one wish, it's to always be as strong as you. It's to know the limits and push them, to laugh at all the small things that don't matter, to love with my whole heart so that no person who enters my home leaves feeling unwanted. If I were to be more like you, I'd do my calisthenics every day. I'd reach down and touch my toes in between batches of snickerdoodles for the cookie jar. I'd swoop up babies in my arms just to hear them giggle and slowly rock them to sleep when drowsiness sat on their eyelashes. Grandma, if I were to say all the ways you shaped me, to describe the fierceness bred in my breath, to always try to do the right thing, to work hard and fight, Grandma, you taught me how to fight. How to slip through the social expectations and scream at the top of my lungs. I know you were never loud, never pushy, but damn if no one ever pushed you around. There is a picture of you sitting on your old side table in my living room. There is a red cardinal that comes to visit me every day. And in the summer, I see the hummingbirds swoop, and I will plant a home for them this spring. A home for you. So every shadow and glimpse of you that continues to live on will always know it's wanted. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Our parents would be, I have to read this because I won't get through it without it written down. Our parents would be very touched to know that you're attending, either in person or online, after the year we've had and the year that we are still having. And it is a blessing to see you all. Just the other day, my husband used a strap clamp that came from a toolbox of my dad's. Dad used that clamp to make wooden frames on which to stretch his canvas prints. I have one of Dad's prints hanging in my living room. The photographs in the video that were playing during the visitation were all my dad's photographs. I gave one of Dad's canvas prints to his dear neighbor in the assisted living home when we were moving out. Now my husband is making frames and I'm making things to stretch on them. I write this on the library table that was in our parents' house. It's now my desk. The lamp is from my mother. The print of the cardinals on the wall above was my folks. The plant in the corner, grown way beyond its original purpose, came from my Grandpa Leach's funeral. That plant reaches the ceiling now. It blooms these sticky yellow buds that drop seeds on the floor, and I won't part with it. I put up with the plant's eccentricities and inconveniences because of its vitality, because it reminds me who I am. I come from vital people. On our mother's 83rd birthday, Morgan and Gwen and I took her to the mall. We were sort of shopping just to get out of the house for a while. By then, the dementia was getting a little tricksy and shopping was hard. So we ended up playing around in the arcade. We took our pictures in the photo booth and we rode the carousel and we had the best time. Those photo booth pictures are taped to the wall above my desk. When Dad was a student at Michigan State and Mom was a hotshot teenage baton twirling champion, she came to perform at MSU. I imagine her in the spotlight, her posture perfect, her clothes and hair always perfect, her performance perfect. I imagine Dad in the crowd, shiny-faced and all of 19 or 20, full of big dreams and ambitions, elbowing his buddies, saying, "I know her." I can still see that girl when I look at those photo booth pictures, that spark. I have recipes and cookbooks with my mother's notes in the margins, a paring knife, her crochet hooks, a handbag. I carry her wallet now as my own. The leather still smells of her hand lotion. She died a year ago today, just 2 months and 8 days after Dad. I have his face. Everybody dies, but everybody lives too. And our parents did live. They took risks, they had fun, they traveled, they loved their relatives and their grandchildren and their friends. They were generous and creative and they loved to laugh. But more than anything, they were a solid, unbreakable unit of mutual love and support. On a farm in Wisconsin, Frank Lloyd Wright built a windmill in 1897, which still stands. The windmill is two shapes merged together, an octagon and a sharp angled diamond shape with the water pumping mechanism running up through the middle of it. The nose of the diamond shape faces into the direction of the prevailing winds. As the storms hit the structure, the angle breaks the force of the wind. The diamond leans into the octagon, which wraps around and supports it. One side of the structure is indispensable to the other. Our parents were like that windmill. While maintaining their own separate shapes, they nevertheless formed one unit. I'm not sure which one was the diamond and which one was the octagon. Maybe they switched roles as the need arose. Maybe that's what made them strong. Meanwhile, I live in a house filled with things that belong to people now gone. And it comes to me more strongly every day that I am a house filled with people now gone. In every room of me, I carry a memory, a tendency, a talent, a fear, a way of talking, a way of looking at the world. I am the smell of Jergens lotion, a good eye for color, and a houseplant run to riot. I am the water from the windmill. Thank you, Mom and Dad.
Thank you, Gwen, Morgan, and Jenny. I don't think there's anything that can say more about the kind of people that Tom and Virginia were than the words that we have received from their own family. I only have a few closing things. I want to read a few words of Tom's wisdom, but one of the things that really touched me about Tom and Virginia during Yvonne's and my years at Glen Eagle was the way that they cared for each other, protected each other, took care of each other. Tom had physical problems. He had a hard time getting off into the dining room. And even though Jenny was a walker, a speed walker, when it came time to go to the dining room, she was slow and methodical and just right by his side, protective and careful to make sure that her husband was okay. Jenny, on the other hand, in those last years had begun to exhibit memory issues, and Tom was equally protective, understanding, and generally patient as Job. Just a side comment from that. I have family members now who are suffering from dementia. And I learned a lot from Tom Prather on how to deal with that. Show compassion, love, steadfastness, and the patience of Job. Here's a few final things to send you on your way today. These are words from Tom. We are all born with a great reservoir overflowing with desires to search for opportunities and knowledge of this magnificent gift of life. Often, we ignore those opportunities, overlook the past by the oases, neglecting to employ the fountains of opportunity that lie in wait just for taking. There is a void in us all yearning to be filled. I believe the answer is not out there, but within each one of us. Our mission is to find it within ourselves. Tom said something that touched me. I've only heard this of one other couple, another couple that was married over 60 years. Tom and Virginia, like any other couple, had their days and had their troubles, but they never went to bed angry. That's quite an accomplishment. And Tom thanked God for the days that he had with Virginia. Comments about life in general. Tom said, every day is a winding road on our life's daily journey, weaving unique strands, creating our own fabric of the life we have chosen from diaper to shroud. And then Tom, in a philosophical vein, said, there must be a power greater than the single cell that started this magnificent universe. The creator of this wonder surely has a plan for me. There must be that spark and hope in us all. To all of you who are present today, I say thank you. You have much to be proud of, and I pray for fond and sustaining memories for all of you. To the Prather's friends who are here today, I say to you, you were blessed to know two remarkable people who became one flesh. To the Prather family, I say to you, you came from really good stock. I pray that the descendants of Thomas and Virginia Prather will make their mark on the world as Tom and Jenny did. May memory sustain you. May love encourage you. If I could just say a closing prayer. Thank you, our Heavenly Father, for these many people who have come here to pay tribute to these dear people who we know are with you today. We ask, Lord, for sustaining love and memories for each and every one who is here, especially for the family. We thank you for the way that Tom and Virginia blessed Yvonne and me, and for the way that they've blessed each of the people here. In the name of your Son, amen. Amen. Thank you so much for being here. I'm not certain what the plans are beyond.
Yeah, I've got you. Thank you, Max.
Thank you.
And thank you. And thank you all for coming today, and thank you to all those who are watching. I know there were some comments from Debbie and Ginny. They so appreciated their lives, and so thank you all for watching. At this time, I'd like to invite all those here to go upstairs. We have a beautiful luncheon prepared where we can continue to share memories and enjoy a little refreshment. So thank you, and go in peace.